Without the tanks and the plunging and like, should we be taking hot showers than cold showers?
You want the American dream. You want the life, the liberty, the happiness. But until you get there, until you achieve your goals and make your dreams come true, you know what you have. You have the journey, the hustle, the climb. I'm Kelsey Humphreys, and where I interview the best of the best in person on their home turf about how they got started, how they got to where they are today, and what you can learn from them about success. Prepare to be inspired, equipped, motivated, encouraged, and have a lot of fun.
5, 4, Kelsey, are you ready?
I'm ready. Thank you for joining me for another episode of The Pursuit. This one is with Tony Robbins. Tony Robbins, you guys. To say that I was freaking out is an understatement. I mean, it just keeps getting cooler and cooler. I love what I do. If you haven't heard of Tony Robbins, which it amazes me every time I run across people who still don't know who he is, he has contributed so much to the world of personal development, motivation, high performance, and he was so warm and friendly, even though I was an interview in the midst of 14 interviews that day. We met him in New York. He was doing a round of interviews because his book just came out in paperback. And, he was just so kind and generous and just, engaged and present, even though he had so much going on. And I had this kind of side goal with myself that maybe he would kiss me on the top of the head, because he did that with Oprah and other famous people, because he's 6'9", 6'7". He's a giant, and he kissed me on the head. So I've arrived, and I know that some people are a little bit skeptical of people in the motivational space, especially Tony, because he was one of the first. He's been doing it forever. But guys, he has so much science to back up what he talks about. He talks about strategies and tactics. There's so much from this interview you can apply to your own life, even if you hate motivational mumbo jumbo. I promise you it's worth your time to watch this to the end, and you will be amazed, just like I was, with everything that you and I can both learn about success from Tony Robbins. Tony Robbins is an entrepreneur, best-selling author, philanthropist, and the nation's #1 life and business strategist. He's a recognized authority on the psychology of leadership, negotiations, and organizational turnaround, and he has served as an advisor to leaders around the world for more than 38 years. He's the author of 5 internationally best-selling books, including his most recent, the #1 New York Times bestseller, Money, Master the Game. He has empowered more than 50 million people from 100 countries through his audio, video, and life training programs. He created the #1 personal and professional development program of all time, and more than 4 million people have attended his live seminars. He has been honored by Accenture as one of the top 50 business intellectuals in the world. Harvard Business Press called him one of the top 200 business gurus, and American Express called him one of the top 6 business leaders in the world, and Fortune magazine called him the CEO Whisperer. As a philanthropist, he feeds 4 million people per year in 56 countries. He has also initiated programs in more than 1,500 schools, 700 prisons, and 50,000 service organizations and shelters. If all that wasn't enough, he personally provided 59 million meals to people in the USA and matched funds to feed 100 million in 2015 alone, through his partnership with Feeding America. Tony, thank you so much for fitting us in today. I know you are super busy, so we are just glad to be here with you. I heard you say in an interview that you are in the business of breakthroughs, yes. And I love that. And so I want to go back to the beginning of your story, and let's talk about that first breakthrough. I mean, you had an abusive family history, and you were young, out on your own because your mom kicked you out. So what do you think was the first real breakthrough that you had as a teen that started you on your path, and how did you get there?
Gosh, there's so many. One of the first ones, I think, was probably just anchoring me in when my mom and my dad, I had 4 different fathers. My mom was a powerful woman, so she kicked my 4th father out, whose name I carry, and he adopted me. And when he went out, she decided I wasn't his side, so she kicked me out too by chasing me out with a knife. And I wasn't worried she was going to stab me or anything. But I decided this is freedom, and I've got to find a way to make my life work. But I had no money. I had a 1960 Volkswagen I worked $40 a week as a janitor to buy and pay for. And so I had no car, I had no money, I had no anything. I went and slept in a person's laundry room, and then I decided I've got to figure out what to do, and I needed to feed my mind because I was so depressed, I was so overwhelmed. I'm missing my brother and sister and feeling just completely out of sorts. So I got on a bus and I traveled 14 miles, I remember, because I ended up running it one time. And I went to this bookstore and I bought this book called The Magic of Believing by Claude M. Bristol. It's the first real book other than maybe Think and Grow Rich or Emerson's essays. And I started on this journey of saying every single day I'm going to feed my mind. I'm not going to hope good thoughts show up. I'm going to read biographies. I'm going to find out what makes people tick. I'm going to understand what makes me tick. And I wanted to read a book a day, but I didn't do that. I took a speed reading class and I read 700 books over 7 years. And they were all personal development, human development, psychology, physiology. And then what I try to do is take anything that I learned and apply it. And then when I applied it, I was 5'1" in my sophomore year in high school. I'm 6'7" now. I tell people the difference is personal growth. Really. But sincerely, I became Mr. Solution because I wanted to help everybody. So I was this little fat guy, and I couldn't lose weight, and I lost weight. And all my buddies are like, "How'd you do that?" And I said, "Well, here's what I did." And they lost weight, and then we all got girls. And that led to, as a young kid, that led to where, if you had a problem, I was Mr. Solution. Especially if you're a girl, I was more motivated to help you. So the breakthrough was really understanding the power of compressing decades into days. That if someone has spent decades of their life and they compress it into a book, and you can read it in an hour or a few days, you have such an advantage. Because when you learn by your own experience, it's painful and it's slow. When you learn by other people's experience, everybody knows in the financial world, other people's money is leverage, right? Well, other people's experience is more powerful than other people's money. Because you can have the money and lose it. But if you get the experience, you can change it all. So I think that was the beginning for me. And it sent me on a lifelong path of hunger. I've never lost my hunger. People ask me all the time, what is the... some of the most successful entrepreneurs in the world, multi-billionaires. What sets all these people apart? And it's always hunger. They've not lost it. Some people are hungry to lose weight for to get to the beach party or to make a certain amount of money, and then they get comfortable. The most successful people on earth have never lost that hunger. So that when you're hungry, there's continuous breakthroughs because you're always looking for answers. That's who I work with. People say, "Who's your demographic?" It's everything. I work with people in every economic realm, from people that are surviving prisoners, kids, to the most successful CEOs in the world. But what everybody has in common is they still have their hunger. Either they're hungry because they're the best and they want that edge, and that's what made them the best, or they're having a birthday with a 0 on it, or they're going through a divorce, or something in their life is making them wake up and say, "I'm not willing to settle anymore, it's time to change." And when that happens, they look for the best in that area, and my name is one of the names that comes up over the decades.
Wow, there's so much in that. But I do want to talk about, you started working for Jim Rohn, also in your teens, right?
I did.
So obviously
17.
that was a turning point because he became a mentor for you.
He did.
How did you get that job?
I had read Think and Grow Rich, and I had gotten involved in personal development, reading these books. And I was at this man's house. I was selling music at the time. I loved music, and I was selling these libraries of music. And this man kept looking at me with my big hands, and first he said, "You'll be the best boxer in the world." And he's selling me this BS. And then he said, "You remind me of somebody. You remind me of this guy named Jim Rohn." I said, "Jim Rohn? I went to a seminar when I was 17. I was like 18 now, or 16. I went there, and I was 17. And he said, "Well, he's a friend of mine." He said, "He's doing a seminar." I said, "I've been doing a seminar." He said, "He's doing another seminar down at the South Coast Plaza Hotel in Orange County. Come down and I'll introduce you." So I thought he was actually inviting me to come down and introduce him. I get down to this place. I pull up my 1968 Volkswagen. I'd moved out.
Oh.
And I gave the keys to the valet, and the car, you turned it off and it blew up. It's kind of crazy. I'm wearing a blue, leisure suit that I had those days with this fake gold chain. I had no money. I got this stuff at the thrift store. And I went in and I heard him speak again. And first of all, I couldn't find this man. And it turned out the man was just selling me so I'd leave. But I talked my way in. I met Jim Rohn and I went to work for him. And I started when I was 17 with Jim, and I became the #1 man in his entire company. He had 1,000 people at that time. And I just grew because I believed so much in changing people's lives. I wasn't doing it for money. I wasn't doing it for stars on my chart. I really was driven to change people's lives, and people felt that. You can't fake that. And then my skills grew along with my enthusiasm and my passion, and then it grew. And eventually I became the top guy for Jim Rohn, and then I, with his support, broke off and started my own company. And I promoted Jim Rohn and other speakers. And then eventually I became the main speaker that I was promoting because I was I was more popular in what I was doing than the people I was promoting,
Yeah.
so that changed things.
When you went off on your own, that's kind of the point I think people, most businesses fail at the beginning, in the
Yeah.
first few years. So
Yeah.
there you are on your own. What do you think were the keys to success those first few years by yourself?
Obsession with adding more value than anybody else ever dreamed of. I mean, my entire life from the very beginning days was, how do I do more for others than anyone else on earth? How do I give them experiences that are lasting? How do I create change where change was impossible? How do I take somebody who's been in therapy for 7 years and in an hour produce that result? And the way I did that was by challenging traditional psychologists and psychiatrists and getting on national radio and saying, give me your worst patient, I'll handle them in an hour, which was pretty abrasive. As a young kid, you can get by with that stuff. But the best part was I backed it up. And so one of the first interventions I did was in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. I got on the radio. And this psychiatrist got on the phone and just on the radio live and just thrashed me. You're a liar. You're a charlatan. People like you should not be allowed on the radio. And I said, sir, I said, are you a scientist? He said, of course, I'm a physician. I said, well, a scientist would never make an assumption. And I said, you've never met me, right? No. You've never met my clients? No. And you're calling me a liar on national radio. I said, you must be stating your hypothesis. Your hypothesis is that I'm a liar and a charlatan, and if you're stating a hypothesis and you're truly a scientist, you got to be willing to test it. Am I right?
Yep.
He goes, well, yeah. I said, great. I'm doing a free guest event at the Holiday Inn tomorrow night. Anyone hearing my voice can come. I'm going to do a series of demonstrations, and I'm going to take one of your clients and turn around. I said, share with me somebody that you've never been able to change. I said, I'm sure you got plenty of those. You want to play hardball? I can play hardball. He goes, we all have patients that aren't ready to change yet. I said, I haven't found any. Of course, I've done 3 therapies total. But I had so much belief. So long story short, he told me this woman he'd been working on for 7 years with a snake phobia. A phobia is not just a fear, it's an uncontrollable response to fear. So like, she dreamed the snake would bite her on the face, and then the adrenaline would shoot through her body and wake her up. And this would happen 4 to 7 times a night.
Oh my goodness.
7 years. So, he was put in a corner, and so he brought her down, and it took me about 15 minutes. At the end of it, I tested first, and she's screaming and shaking, and then I wrapped the snake around her. And that changed my entire career, because in that moment, there was no question. Everybody in the audience saw, this woman is transformed. And I said, you've been treated by that psychiatrist for how many years?
Wow.
7 years. Then I took on sports stars. Then I turned around, I did some work with Mother Teresa, and Nelson Mandela, and Bill Clinton. Yeah. And as the years went by, it just built and built and built.
Man, that's incredible. Now, going back to how much you read, because there are so many people who want to do what you do, to speak and to help transform. And I love that you're a strategist too. You have so many strategies whenever you start to really dig into your content.
Yeah.
And I wonder, another thing you said is that you don't like dabblers, that you have no patience for dabblers, which I thought was right on. But people look at successful people, like I study successful people, and a lot of them read.
Yeah.
So at what point, how do you balance, like, I've got to switch off consuming and start creating or start taking action? Or, I just feel like now everyone's like, well, to be successful, I'm going to read. And then they become dabblers in all these different people's psychologies.
Yeah, I think the balance for me was I would read and apply. If you just keep reading, it doesn't do you any good. And oftentimes people say, like, how do I start my business? I got to support my family. I said, well, tell me what your schedule is. And they tell me, I work from 8 to 5, and then I come home at 6, 7 o'clock. And I said, what do you do with the other 8 hours of your day? Because that's what it takes in the beginning. It takes some time to educate, and it takes time to execute. And I really believe that if a person is just reading all the time, that's not going to do anything. It's like whatever you learn, you got to apply it and make mistakes and uncover what you really know versus what you don't know. And I really believe there's a great book I'd recommend people read called The Talent Code. And it's a book about some of the greatest athletes in the world that come in bunches. Like there's a town, I'm going to mess this up in terms of numbers, I'm going to make it up because I don't remember the exact number, but I think there were like, in Russia, there's like 31 people that won gold medals from one town.
Wow.
Like, how do you explain that? Or Serena and Venus, like how does that happen? And so what they did is they found that the people who are the best in the world don't just read, they do what they call deep practice, which is what I do. Deep practice is you put yourself on the line where you're going to fail, likely, and you're trying to find a way to succeed in spite of it. So when I get up and I'd say, I'm going to take your person and wipe them out in an hour, and they worked on it for 7 years, that was kind of,
It's do or die.
Yeah, it's do or die. You got to show it up. I made it so I had nowhere to go but forward. I put a wall here, and I pushed it into myself, so I had to push myself forward. And when you have to deliver, when you do what they call deep practice, where you're at your edge, it's not practice that makes perfect. And some people say perfect practice makes perfect. It's deep practice that makes perfect. And I've been doing that for 38 years. I'm going my 39th year. So, when you do that for 39 years with people, with 50 million people from 100 countries, I could be an idiot. And they have to see there are patterns that make people crazy, frustrated, overwhelmed, stressed. There are patterns that make people euphoric and happy and grateful and loving. And people are not broken. They don't need to be fixed, but they do need to change their patterns. And that's what I'm good at.
What do you think is the biggest pattern hurdle you see in beginner entrepreneurs?
Oh, that's a good question. Let me put it this way. Most entrepreneurs are artists in their nature. I look at 3 types of personalities. An artist is somebody that has a tremendous gift, a skill, an ability, a talent. Like an athlete. Curry is in the NBA is an incredible artist. Some people, they're artist sales. They can sell ice to an Eskimo. Some people, it's writing software. They're incredible. Or designing clothes. And most businesses are started by an artist who says, I can do it better. But they don't realize that as you start to try to grow a business, you're the most talented employee you have in the beginning and the cheapest one, right?
Yeah.
And now you have to hire other people, and they're not going to do as good a job, and it ties people into this negative effect. What I really see is the biggest mistake that these individuals make is they don't understand business. They get in because they want to do good work for their client, and most of them, as you know, 96% are gone in 10 years, and the 4% that survive, they aren't necessarily profitable. 5% of all businesses ever crack $1 million gross, not net profitability, gross. Yeah. And you have 0.0006, so it's 6 out of 100,000 businesses will ever do 10 million gross. So I say to people in business, I never encourage people to get in business. I try to push them away because it's too hard. If you don't have the internal drive to make it through that psychologically, you're better partnering with somebody. You're better doing something else. I think underestimating business is the challenge. And I always say that 80% of the chokehold on the growth of any business is always the owner, it's the leader, and 80% of that is their psychology, and 20% is skills. Like, if you don't know how to market, you're in trouble. Most entrepreneurs get in trouble because they don't know how to read their financials. They don't have a clue. I didn't either. It's like you can go out on a plane on a day like today that's a decent day, and you can fly if you're a pilot with what they call visual flying rules. You can look out around you and you can fly. You get in a storm, you better be able to read those instruments or you're going to die. And most entrepreneurs don't know how to read those instruments. They look down and they see profit and loss and they go, oh, I made a profit or I made a loss, and they have a beer either way. One to drown out the pain or the other one to celebrate, right? And profit is a theory, as you know. Accounting is a very special language, and unless you understand how to use accounting to make better decisions, until you learn how to understand and measure things in a way that gives you better decision-making capability, then you get broadsided. And, profitability, you get a lot of profit and no cash. So I think not understanding the full aspect of a business, not managing your own psychology, and not knowing your numbers would be 3 critical things that I think sabotage most businesses.
Back in the beginning, in let's say your first decade,
yes.
What was the average day like for you back then?
Oh my God. 20-hour days without exaggeration, sleeping 4 and 5 hours, 5.5 hours being the most I'd sleep, cramming like crazy, learning, practicing, articulating, finding ways to do things, scheduling myself in the most insane environments where no one's going to listen, and I figure out how to get through to them and shake them. I remember I went in this one little office, it was a real estate office, to speak one day, and there's supposed to be 25 people there, and 7 showed up, and 3 were drunk from the night before, and 1 was smoking a big cigar, and the phones were ringing, and I had to learn how to come in and take control of those rooms because I want to make a difference, and I learned how to do it. Over the first decade, for sure, it was pure will, it was 20-hour days, and then I still have 20-hour days, my wife would tell you. I'd say more like 18 or 19. But the difference, I do more with my pinky today than I could do with all my focus before. Because as the years go by, as you build your skills and your talents, you have more to give. You build a brand if you really deliver for decades, like I have. You build a brand that becomes impeccable, and it opens doors for you, so it makes it much, much easier. But you got to get to that point. And you can't buy brand. You can't advertise brand. The world we're in today, good news travels fast and bad news travels faster. So if you can do incredibly good work and you can avoid not doing bad work, you're going to have an opportunity over time to really end up with a brand. And brand's everything. People get on their down at a 7-Eleven or reach buying something else to get a Coca-Cola. And yet when they do taste tests, often the other brand would win. It's just they identify with that brand, and so you've got to become one if you're going to be successful in business.
That's a great answer. You are probably familiar with the Property Brothers on HGTV. I interviewed them last year, and Drew Scott is a big fan of yours.
Oh, wow.
And so when I posted that I was going to interview, he wrote in a question, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah, cool.
So he wanted to know how you balance work and family, which a lot of people, I'm sure, wonder about that.
Yeah. When people talk about work-life balance, I was talking to Mary Calhoun Erdos, who's Morgan Stanley. She manages $2.6 trillion with a T dollars. Probably the most influential woman in the financial world, brilliant woman. And I asked her, because I was interviewing 50 of the smartest financial people on the face of the earth. I said, I know you're a very deeply caring mom and wife, and how do you balance all that? And she said, Tony, she goes, I read this in one of your books. She quoted from. She goes, there is no such thing as work-life balance. There's only work-life integration, and I really believe that in my soul. So in my companies, my wife and I, we live our mission together. We're 24/7, 365 together, and we love it. Because we're driven by the same things. One of my sons is a partner in several of my financial businesses. One of my other sons is in the coaching business. My daughter's an actress and, totally different business, but she cares for people the same way. So there's a common denominator within our family. We're all so mission driven that we don't have to separate the two. When your family is involved in your mission, you're not pulled apart. You're pulled together in the same direction. I think the hard part is so many families have totally different lives, and they come together when they're exhausted and try to have a relationship together, and I think that's really hard for people today. I always encourage people to say, listen, in your partnership in life, you want to find somebody who's your best friend, because intimacy and passion is easy to turn on, but friendship is not. And if you have a friend who shares your values and your mission, and then if you're privileged enough to do things together as a business owner, I find that to be the greatest possibility of that work-life integration.
That is a great answer. And I was watching you talk to Oprah. You did her an interview on OWN, right,
Yes.
a couple years ago. And she asked, like Jessica and Charles wrote in, they both asked, everyone wants to know about your stamina, how you do these events. Because for those of you that don't know, he's basically walking the length of a marathon on stage and speaking and doing all these, you're gesticular. How do I say that? So it's not just walking.
Crazy is another word.
Yeah. So it's not just walking.
I got to think about it. Most people won't sit for a 3-hour movie that someone spent $300 million to make. And here's little me with a little music that I select and my voice and my insights. And I got to hold people for 50 hours in a weekend, and they can vote with their feet and no one leaves. Like Oprah said to me, Tony, I love you, but I can't sit anywhere more than 2.5 hours. Don't be offended when I leave. Yeah. And I said, no problem, but don't be surprised if you stay. And, at the end of 12 hours, she was literally standing on a chair in front of her own camera going, this is the greatest experience of my life, right?
Yeah.
So I know how to capture that. But part of where the energy comes from is it's psychic energy. I do things physically. I train incredibly hard. My trainer has trained some of the greatest boxers and some of the greatest athletes in the world. And anybody who interviews them, I say, who trains the hardest of anybody? He says, Tony Robbins.
Wow.
Because I get on stage and I've got to do, usually I do somewhere around 16 to 18 miles on the first day, and I do 26 to 27 miles on the third day. We start at 8:30 in the morning. I go to 1 a.m. There's 1 hour break. You can leave anytime you want. No one leaves. And it's because when you're doing something you dislike, a minute feels like an eternity. When you're completely fulfilled, like all your needs are being met, time disappears, right? So I'm not doing it for the time, I'm doing it to serve people. And so that sense of serving gives me so much energy. And I'm not inside me, I'm in that audience. I'm feeling them. If I was inside me, I couldn't hold the audience. I'm with them completely. I can feel what's happening over here, And I'm all over that room. I don't just stand on that stage. There's 10,000 people in that room, and you never know where I'm going to strike, which keeps people really engaged.
And so I think to have that, obviously it's not just the night before. You have daily practices.
Without doubt.
So tell us some of the daily rituals, both health and mind, that you do every day.
Well, I'm not a vegan anymore. I was for about 14 years. I do eat fish, but I have a very clean diet. My wife loves desserts, and she's got me to enjoy those with her. So we have our where we go perfect, and then we go off and go have some fun and enjoy it. But daily, I start out every single day. I have my normal workouts, but I start the day by jumping in a freezing cold water, and I do that as a mental discipline for myself, as well as for your lymph and for taking out irritation and inflammation in the body. So I drop in 56-degree water, and I do it, A, to teach my brain when I say we're going to do something, we do it now. And I have such a habit of it now, there's no hesitancy. And I find there's no hesitancy anywhere else where I want to say to my brain, we're going to do this. I think self-mastery is the most important first lesson. And then I have a cryotherapy unit, which takes the body down to minus 250 Fahrenheit, minus 250, which sounds like you'd burn, but it uses nitrogen, so there's no water. And it takes the inflammation out of my body, because there's tremendous inflammation doing what I do for a living with a level of intensity. And then, I have a whole series of yogic practices I do for my flexibility, strength training that I do. I've got Billy Beck as my trainer. He's been rated the #1 trainer in the United States. And so I'm committed to being physically ready to deliver. And then emotionally, I start every day by doing what I call priming. I don't hope that I'm going to wake up feeling great, because I don't all the time. I mean, I'm exhausted. Last night I had 3 hours sleep, and today I've got 15 media interviews, right? It's a full day, and tomorrow and the next day, because my paperback and my book's coming out. So, what I do is I start my day with, I promise myself 10 minutes to prime myself. What does that mean? I change my body massively. I do a set of movements that change biochemistry, proven. And then I just do 3 things for 10 minutes, because my philosophy is, if you don't have 10 minutes for yourself, you don't have a life. There's no excuse. Right. And I'm not a big meditator, and I don't believe in trying to not think, because it's not possible. So what I do is I concentrate for 3.5 minutes on just 3 things every morning that I'm incredibly grateful for. And I pick one of them, and I make it really simple, like the wind on my face or the smile on one of my children's faces. So I don't just have to have a giant thing to be grateful. And the reason I go into gratitude is most people are wired for stress. They're wired for fear. They're wired for pissed off. And they've got a dirt road to happiness. And neurologically, the more you go into a state, the more wired you get to do it automatically. So I know that fear and anger are the things that mess people up. You cannot be grateful and be fearful simultaneously. You can't be angry and grateful simultaneously. So what I do is I wire myself every morning in a very associated way that makes me feel that feeling, and it's such a beautiful balance. Then I do 3 minutes of prayer for those that I love and for my own healing. And then I do 3 minutes where I think of what I call my 3 to thrive. What are the 3 most important outcomes I'm working on over the next 90 days or 6 months or 12 months? And I see them as done, completed, finished. I give thanks for it. And then I'm done. And sometimes, frankly, it almost always goes longer than 10 minutes. But once you commit to 10 minutes, and that's all you got to do, it feels so good that I'm usually there for 15 or sometimes as much as 20. But I don't hope I'm going to show up well. It's like, an athlete doesn't hope they're going to have muscle. You work it out. And the silliest question I get asked, I've gotten asked for, my entire career is, like, you really have down days, don't you? I mean, you're not happy all the time, are you? Of course I'm not, but I've built this set of emotional muscles where I have I used to be depressed or sad or worried or whatever for days on end, Now I might experience that for 90 seconds. It's
really, 90 seconds?
I have a 90-second rule. I call it a suffering rule.
Wow.
It doesn't matter how much money you make. I mean, I sit down with billionaires that they have everything they ever dreamed of, and they're still unhappy. They're still suffering. And the reason is, most of us, our happiness is tied to everybody else behaving the way we want. Well, I've got 1,200 employees in 18 companies. We do $5 billion a year in sales. What are the chances of everybody on 3 continents doing what I think they should be doing correctly? Right. It's not going to happen. So then you'd be stressed all the time. So I've just decided life is too short to suffer. Too short to live in stress. And when I'm stressed, I'm not there for my kids. If I'm stressed, I'm not there for my wife. If I'm stressed, I'm not going to give my best to myself or my family or my audience. So it's not that I don't get pissed off or angry or frustrated. That's would be a total lie. It's just I won't tolerate it. We all get what we tolerate. And we think of that in other people, but I believe the most important thing is you get what you tolerate in yourself. If you're going to tolerate feeling sorry for yourself or being pissed off and saying I have a right to do that, you have a right to do it, but it makes everybody else miserable. And to me, there's nothing worse than an angry rich man or rich woman. You just want to slap them.
Yeah.
They've got everything and they're still unhappy, but that's the nature of the human brain. Our brains are 2 million years old. They haven't changed a whole lot. And they're wired to look for what's wrong because it's survival. If I look for what's wrong and I can anticipate it, I can either fight it or I can flight from it.
Right.
And so we used to have to worry about saber-toothed tigers and mathematics, and now we worry about how other people perceive us. Do we have enough money in a world where half the planet lives on $2.50 a day? So if you're broke in this country, you're better off than 99% of the planet. We make things bigger than they are. And so I try to keep that in perspective. I also interview people regularly that have lost their legs, their arms, their eyesight. Anyone who's been through the worst tasks that's still happy. And happier than most people have everything going for them. And I've made that a study. So my whole focus is really helping people have an extraordinary quality of life. That means life on your terms, not mine. You might have that idea as to be a great writer and have 3 perfect children. Or it might be to paint, it might be to do poetry, it might be to build $1 billion company. I don't know what it is. I just know whatever's right for you, I want you to have it, but I know you need to master the skill of achievement, taking your vision, making it real, but you also have to master the art of fulfillment, because lots of people achieve, but very few people are fulfilled. And so a big part of my teachings in my life today is, how do you have fulfillment? I'm going to give you a perfect example would be, I always tell people, if you think about it, I think we lost, in this country, a national treasure about 1.5 years ago, Robin Williams. I don't care where I go in the world. The last year I've been asking people in China and Australia and Germany, everywhere I go, how many of you loved Robin Williams? And 99% of them raised their hands and said, don't raise your hand, it's not real. They love this man. They never knew him, they love him. He was an ultimate achiever. He wanted to make the whole world laugh, he did it. He wanted his own TV show, he did it. He wanted the #1 TV show, he did it. He wanted to make movies, he did it. He wanted to win an Academy Award for not being funny, dramatically, he did it. He had a beautiful family, he wanted that, he did it. He made more money than he could ever spend. And he hung himself. Yeah. So to me, success without fulfillment is the ultimate failure. And so my view is, of the 2 skills, achieving and being fulfilled is more important. And I'm a big achiever, obviously. Yeah. And I'll help people achieve anything they want. But you have to master both those skills, or you're not going to have the quality of life you deserve.
Wow, incredible. And the priming that you've been doing that for a decade, 20 years?
Oh, no. I did a version of it probably starting 10 years ago. But the last 2 years is where I decided it was every day, no matter what. Okay. I used to do, incantations, which I still do. It's different than an affirmation. An affirmation, you go, I'm happy, I'm happy, I'm happy, I'm happy, and your brain goes, BS, you're not happy. An incantation is where you use your body so congruently in what you're saying, you say it with such intensity out loud, that your body, your mind, your focus all goes into that state over and over again, and that wires you. So I've done incantations since I was 17.
Right, there. That's what I want to talk about. So you've worked on rewiring. That's a difficult word to say. You've worked on rewiring your brain for a really long time.
Yes.
So someone who is watching and is struggling maybe with the same habit or the same issue over and over again, they want to change. What do you think is step 1 to start rewiring?
Change is never a matter of ability. It's always a matter of motivation or drive, hunger. So it's like someone says, I can't stop smoking. I said, okay, well, if I put a gun to your child's head and you really believe I'm going to pull the trigger if you don't smoke, if you smoke, would you smoke? Oh, no. Would you stop? Oh, yes. Yeah. People can change anything when they make up their mind. The problem is, most of us are addicted to our problems. I always tell people the biggest drug is not heroin, it's not cocaine, it's not pot, it's not, prescription drugs. It's problems. Because we're all afraid that we're not enough. It's the deepest fear. I don't care if presidents of the United States I've worked with, billionaires, top athletes, entertainers. We all have, am I not pretty enough? Am I not handsome enough? Am I not smart enough? Am I not funny enough? Am I not rich enough? Am I not something enough? And that feeling is so horrible because what's behind that is the fear that if I'm not enough, I won't be loved. And to be worthless and unloved is psychological or emotional death. When people feel like they're worthless and unloved, that's often when they look to take their own life. Or they just settle where they pretty much die emotionally and they continue to live physically. And so my whole approach with people is to say, look, there's only one thing that's going to make you happy. Progress. Progress equals happiness. Not even achieving your goals will make you happy. You achieve your goal, for how long are you happy? You made all this money and now it's not enough. You got all this acknowledgement and now what, right? It gets old. If you sit at the table of success too long, you'll get bored, you'll get fat. So progress is growth. We all grow or we die. Your relationship's growing or it's dying. Your business is growing or it's dying. There is no plateau. When you're in that plateau, you're on the way down. And so my whole focus is how do you help people make progress? Because even if you're massively overweight, but you really start making progress, you're going to start to feel excited. And progress never ends. The training never stops. That's the life that I live, and that's why I feel the level of joy and fulfillment. That's why I want to help so many people, because I know what it means.
Wow. So going back to your daily rituals, because I know after people watch this, they're going to want to try and do some of the things you do. How can the average Joe, Ethan wrote in asking about this, do the hot-cold thing without the tanks and the plunging and, like, should we be taking hot showers then cold showers? What can we do?
The value of it is the discipline. The value of it is the change in your lymph system. There's a health benefit to it. It's been done for thousands of years. People go into the cold and then go into the saunas, for example, in Europe. you can go, most places you can go work out usually have a sauna and very often a cold pool as well. You can take freezing showers. This is a way to kind of alter your state. But this is just one thing. It's, you know, not the only thing. I think the priming is even more important because you want to, if you consistently lay down the tracks, in talent code they explain that if someone is really good at something, they've been at their edge over and over again, but what they're building is myelin. Myelin is the white stuff in the brain. And myelin is like the connection on a, you know, do you have dial-up or do you have, what's the word I'm looking for? Glass, right? Glass is instantaneous, dial-up, remember the old experience, dial-up. Well, the more you do something with enough intensity and with enough focus on doing it as well as you possibly can, the more myelin you build. So when you see somebody's a great dancer, great singer, and they can do it easily, or they say, Tony, how do you get up and do 50 hours with no notes, or a 6-day seminar, there's no notes, and you keep people riveted. Well, this is not my first rodeo, right?
Yeah.
I've done this a million times, and I always tell people, you get rewarded in public for what you practice in private.
Yeah.
You look at somebody who's so talented, they weren't just born with a talent. They might have, you know, a great body, or strength, or fast twitch muscles, but they maximize that. And that was done by this practice that nobody else sees. And so I want my invitation to people who say, what practice? I'd say, every day stand guard at the door of your mind. My original teacher, Jim Rohn, taught me that. And what that meant was, feed your mind, because if you don't feed your mind, weeds are automatic. So 30 minutes a day of reading or listening, because when you're driving in your car, I believe in net time, no extra time. You're working out, you're cleaning the house, you're driving your car. Why wouldn't you feed your mind during that time so that you're stronger than you've ever been before? Physically doing something each day, even if it's 10 minutes, that gets your heart moving, gets your body moving, that puts you in that state that, I always tell people, fear is physical. You can feel it in your throat, your gut, so's courage, right? So if I go and I pound weights really hard, or I do a quick, intense sprint, or I go in that cold water, there is a flush of your entire body. When you do that with your body, your mind gets stronger as well. They are so tied together, the mind and body. And then I think the third practice is deciding what you're really after that excites you, that will get you up early and keep you up late, and finding a role model that's done it or something like it, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You'll still do your own unique approach, but why wait? You know, it might take someone a decade to figure something out, or two, and I can figure out what they do in an hour or a week or a month at the worst case. I believe in that learning by other people's experience. And then my fourth element is a practice of doing something for others every day. You know, I was in San Francisco as an extreme example, but a fun example. And I saw, you know, I follow the news, obviously, and I care about homeless people, and there was this article about these nuns in the Tenderloin district of San Francisco. I don't even live in San Francisco, obviously. But they were being kicked out. They were being evicted, and they're dealing with the poorest of the poor, and they're about to be on the street themselves, and no one was doing anything. So I got on a plane, I flew to San Francisco, I went and met with these nuns, and I went and talked to the owner, and I negotiated with the owner to let them stay there for another year, gave them $50,000, and then got so tied in with these nuns, and I was so moved by how much they love these people. They don't just feed these people, they love these people that no one else cares about. That, you know, 2 days ago I just bought them a soup kitchen, right? $750,000, and I did it. And it was like spontaneous and fun and extraordinary. Well, I can only be in that place to be able to do things like that if I prime myself daily, if I fed my mind, if I knew what I was really about, and if every day I'm looking to do something. You know, my daily prayer is, you know, I want to be a blessing in the lives of the people I meet. Sometimes that's just a smile. Sometimes that's just taking a moment for a photograph. Sometimes that's an intervention. You know, there's so many ways. But when you know your purpose and daily you strengthen yourself, eventually your gifts make room for you, right? And if they haven't made room for you yet, I mean, you still got to work hard on yourself. Jim Rohn taught me, work harder on yourself than you do your job. If you can become more valuable, if you can become smarter, if you can have more to give people, the more valuable you become to other people in the marketplace, the better you're going to do. So that's why I really believe that focus on adding value is the most important thing. You've got to add value within yourself so you can add value to other people.
Do you still practice speaking? I mean, at this point, do you still have to like prepare? Well, I know I heard you say that one thing people don't realize is how much you prepare for your seminars. Why don't you share about that? Because I thought that was amazing.
Well, my wife, that's the number one thing people always ask my wife, what do I know about Tony or don't know about Tony, or you'd be surprised by it. She said, how much he prepares. I over-prepare. I read everything, and I could get up and do things with my pinky at this stage. But what I want to be is I want to be in a state of readiness. I want things to be current in my mind. I want to know that audience before I walk in as much as I can so I can look at somebody and say something and blow their mind, right? And so I will work preparing till 2 or 3 in the morning sometimes, and I got to be up at 6 and get on stage. But it's almost an obsession with me, really. So, but then all that I prepared for, my creative team will tell you, I don't like lay out a speech. I lay out kind of a mind map. I knew my outcomes. I know what I want to accomplish. I might have some stories or examples that I want to utilize. But then when I walk out there, it always changes because I feel the audience and I see where they are and I'm current with them. And then the things I prepared for, something will come out at some point, but it's rarely that what I prepare for that I actually speak. And I would be bored to tears if I got up every time I did the same stuff. It'd make me nuts. Now, certain things I learned to teach a certain way. I tell a story a certain way because you know it'll penetrate someone. It's like a great song.
Right.
But I can't do the whole thing that way or it'd be just incredibly boring.
Mm-hmm. And then Marika wrote in and asked, I thought this was interesting, about actually prioritizing your day or organizing a day or your tasks. Do you have any strategies for that?
I teach a whole system of that. First of all, I'm very impressed you're remembering all the people and their questions right now. So
trying.
You guys out there should really know she cares. That's pretty awesome of you. I teach a process, early in my career when I was 17, 18 years old, and I was running my first little companies, I was stressed all the time. I was picking up the dry cleaning. I had to get the tickets, And at one point I realized I got to find a way to delegate some of this. And that didn't work either. Delegation almost never works. Delegation, you give someone to do it, and then you check in when it's time and they haven't done it, you're upset.
Yeah.
I believe in leveraging. Leveraging is the idea that we can lift a giant boulder here with a very little amount of weight with the right lever. If I work through you and with you, if I can get you to understand what I'm after and why I'm after it, but I'm going to let you come up with your own ways to do it. Between us, we can leverage. And if I stay in touch with you and see how you're doing before the deadline, now delegation that doesn't accomplish leverage, you can move. Now, there's no way I can do $5 billion in sales in 18 companies all myself. It's all through leverage. And there's no way it'd be there either if I delegated. Because I used to delegate and then things didn't get done and I'd be crazy, right? So I teach everyone how to leverage. I also teach, if you just write down all your to-dos in a day, and you're an overachiever, there's no way you can achieve them all. So what most people do is they stop even writing them down because they don't want to be disappointed with themselves. Mm-hmm. Early on, I realized I need to focus not on what do I need to do, but what do I want? And I created a system called RPM. It's just 3 questions. And the first question is, what do I want? What's the result? That's the R. Because you increase the RPMs in an engine, you can get there so much faster with less effort. So I was like, okay, what do I really want? President Clinton called me one day and he said, I'm going to be impeached in the morning. What should I do? True story. And I said, could you call me sooner? That's the first thing, right?
Oh my God.
Tomorrow morning, right?
Wow.
And then I asked him the question, you're asking me what should you do? You have to first answer, what do you want?
Yeah.
What's the result? Do you want to stay in office? If you want to stay in the office, do nothing. They're not going to impeach you. Easy for me to say, but they don't have the votes. You know they don't have the votes. I said, if you want to have the respect of the American people, then you have to do something different. Right? If you want to feel congruent, like you're living what you might have to do something different. So when you know what the target is, and then the next thing you want to know is why? What's my purpose? It's like someone says, I want to be a millionaire. Well, purpose is more powerful than the object. Why? I want to provide a home for my mom. We grew up poor. I want to do this for my dad. I want to do this for my children. There's more power in that than the object. So I need to know the object, but I got to know the purpose. I remember one day when I was like 23, 24 years old, and I came home, and this is before, I'm old enough, it was before email and the internet, that's how ancient I am, and it was phone calls. And I had 127, or I'm making the number up, it was like almost 130 messages. And I looked down and I was like crestfallen, like how am I going to call these people back? I just got off the road, I'm burnt to the ground. And I looked at some of the people, President of the United States, billionaire client, and then, I'm just a kid, I'm like, 5 years ago I would have killed them one of these phone calls, right? I can't bitch about this. But what I realized is I need to think about each person and say, why am I calling them? What's the outcome? Why am I calling them? And then I was ready to go. And then the last part in RPM, the M is the massive action plan or the map. And so I brainstormed what are all the possibilities of what it would take to achieve this. And then the most important part is I know I'm not going to do all those. So I picked the 20%, they're going to give me 80% of the result. I go asterisk those. Because otherwise, you get addicted to your to-do list, and you can have lots of movement and no achievement. I cut through it all, because once I know the outcome and why, you might have a better way to get there. My team might have a better way to get there than I'm coming up with, so I share it. Or we all just see it, and we all know what to do. It becomes so clear, and you don't get caught up in all the to-dos. To-dos will make you crazy. What you got to shift to is outcomes, results, purposes, the why, and then a map or a massive action plan, and then tighten that baby down to what really can be accomplished.
Obviously, I knew that answer was going to be awesome because you had your whole system. And what's cool, you mentioned the 80-20, and you talk about that in the book about how these guys focus on massive, I'm going to butcher it, okay, but how they focus on reward and not just...
Yeah, asymmetrical risk reward is what you're thinking about.
Thank you, yes.
Yeah.
So I want to get to this book, but one more thing I want to cover before we kind of switch to this is your number one piece of advice for someone out there today who is stuck or discouraged in their business.
Well, I'd love to know why they're stuck, because that would help me, right?
Yeah.
But if I was going to try and give you something general, I would say, if you're not passionate about your business, sell it, give it away, or you need to change. You can't be in a business you're not passionate about. Mm-hmm. And most people start another business and another business, and they have 3 or 4 businesses that don't make any money, but they're really excited because it's always fun to start something new. I teach people there's treasure in every business, and your job is to find it. There's a gentleman in the 1980s, I'm blanking on his name right now, but he was looking for a Spanish galleon that supposedly had $1 billion worth of gold in it. And he looked, if I remember right, for 26 years.
Wow.
And can you imagine 5 years, every day working your guts out and getting nothing for it, and then convincing investors to give you more money?
Wow.
He did it over all this time, and he eventually found the gold. He got $500 million. So I always ask audiences, what would you have to believe to go 27 years, whatever the real number of years were, without getting one dime of reward to keep going? Mm-hmm. And then people go, well, you'd have to believe it was there. Right. If you don't believe it's there, you're not going to find it. What else would you have to believe? Well, that I'm going to find it, that I will find it. That's true. And what else? That it's worth it. If you're missing any of those 3 in your business, you're never going to find the treasure. And I know this because of my own business. I had a time where I had all these billionaires that I'd been coaching. I was 31 years old, and I never asked for help. And I built my business, and I had all these new opportunities, and they were so exciting. And in my business, there's not been a lot of people that have maintained successful companies in the personal development business. The secrets come and go, and they're gone. There's not a lot of sustainability. So I said, if I'm going to really do a good job with this, I really need to make sure that I can sustain through time. How am I going to sustain through time? I'm going to have to make sure that whatever it is that I'm delivering, the amount of added value has got to be greater than anybody could possibly imagine. And so that became my entire obsession and focus, and that's what pulled me through. And so I think for businesses that are having troubles, they don't have that passion. They're not obsessed by how do I do more for someone. They're not realizing there's still treasure in this business. And when I went to go meet with these billionaires, a couple of them said to me, listen, I told them the whole story of my business, and I only succeeded because I created raving fans. I didn't know how to run a business. And they said, Tony, you're so new at this. You got to go back to your business. I'm like, yeah, but it's such a lousy margin business. I'm going to do it because I love it no matter what. They go, Tony, there's treasure in that business. And that very business they told me about, I sold for half of it for $200 million, 15 years later. And back then, that business wouldn't have been worth $5 million, right? Because I believed the treasure was there. I absolutely knew I was going to find it, and I knew it was going to be worth it. And so I was willing to do whatever it takes to make that happen. Having 3 or 4 more children, more businesses, before you've mastered one, guaranteed way to fail.
Yeah, great advice. And obviously he just said he sold half of that business for $200 million. So you obviously know about money. But what I think is interesting is that there's none of your personal opinion in this book.
I didn't want it to be that. I wanted this book to be literally a reflection of the best minds in the world. And I had access, because most people don't know, I've been coaching Paul Tudor Jones, who's one of the top 10 financial traders in the history of the world, for 22 years, and he hasn't lost money in 22 years. There's no one in this category that can say that. So I have learned so much from Paul, but I thought if I could also get Warren Buffett, if I could get Ray Dalio, most people don't even know his name, he's the largest hedge fund in the world, $160 billion. You need a $5 billion net worth, not a billion, $5 billion, and $100 million for him to even talk to you. Now he won't even do it for that. I got access to these people, and I wanted to do what I do best, which is take the complex and make it simple enough that anybody could really take that information, follow the 7 steps, and produce the result. And what I'm really proud of is in this thing is I asked all of these people, asked them a question at the end. I said, like with Ray Dalio, I said, look, you're coaching, the Prime Minister of China called during my interview with him, and he had to leave to coach him for a little while. Wow. That's like how potent this thing is, right? A big hedge fund where billionaires put their money is like maybe $15 billion. He's $160 billion. He's 10 times their size, right? And he's averaged 21% for 23 straight years. Not bad. So I asked him, I said, if you couldn't give any of your money to your kids, not a dime, but you were going to make sure that they were going to be financially well off or wealthy, what principle, what distinction, what strategy, what portfolio would you give them? I asked everybody this. I got so many great answers, but Ray Dalio's was the best. He said, Tony, I literally obsessed on that for 15 years. Because he said, I have 1,500 employees. And he said, when I pass, I don't just want my kids to do well. I want all of the nonprofits that I'm supporting, all the charities to do well. And I'm not going to be here. And he said, so I need to figure out how can I create a portfolio that would do well in any market. He said, also I was obsessed with wanting to know, why is it that all financial planners tell you get a balanced portfolio as you get like into your 50s, right? Designed as you get older to protect you in case the market drops. But it doesn't protect you. If you look at 2000, 2008, what went down? Everything except cash, right, in 2008. And he said, those people got killed. And what he found was that most people think they're having a balanced portfolio. It's balanced in dollar amounts, it's not balanced in risk. And so, you know, equities, stocks, are 3 times more volatile than bonds. So if you got like a 60-40, 60% in stocks and 40% in bonds, which would be typical balanced portfolio, 50-50, you're actually 90% at risk, only 10% protected. And when the market melts down, you get killed. He said, there's got to be a better answer. So long story short, he explained to me his answer of how he's done this, where he's able to make money in almost every single market that exists. And afterwards I said, you know, Ray, I said, you really gave me something genius here. But I said, you didn't tell me the amounts. It's like you told me to make a chocolate cake, and you said, use some chocolate, but I can't make a chocolate cake without the right amounts. Wrong amounts is not going to work. He goes, that's so true, Tony, but I can't give you my secret sauce. And I said, he goes, you know, you got to have a $5 billion net worth. He gave me the whole thing. I said, that's not true. You won't take anybody's money now. You've maxed out. And you're giving away half your net worth. You're that giving. Give me the secret sauce. Let me help the average person. So he said, I can't do it because there's leverage involved. And I said, design one without leverage. He goes, well, it wouldn't be perfect. I said, your idea not perfect. They call him the Steve Jobs of investing. It's everybody else's idea perfect. He goes, let me think. And I got chills down my spine when he literally said, let's try this. And I started writing down what he's telling me. It's like the master telling you. And then he says to me, go test that. You know, past performance doesn't mean future performance when something's done for 2 years or 5 years, even 10. He said, test that formula over the entire modern history of investing, 75 years, and see what you get. So I hired 2 firms to do it. The one guy called me at 11:30 at night. He said, I've got to talk to you. He goes, this is unbelievable. I said, what? What happened? He said, it's made money 85% of the time. And the 15% when it lost money, the most ever lost in 75 years. Think about it, 2008, 50% drops. 2000, all the huge drops. The most it ever lost is 3.9%, less than 4%. He said, Tony, if you could go to Vegas and you could be right 85% of the time with an average return of just under 10%, and then when you're wrong, you lose an average of 1.6%, and you're only wrong 15% of the time, how often would you gamble? You gamble all the time. So that formula gave me, it's in the book. And we have a 401k where people can even put their 401k in that. It's only one of many strategies, but that's the type of insight you get when you learn from the best that exists on earth as opposed to somebody who's really good.
Yeah, I felt like I really learned a lot listening to your interviews in preparation for this interview, because they're all been about the book. So I'm like learning, and I get on these stats, and I feel really smart. And so I'm definitely going to read it. And I'm not a numbers person, and I was super intimidated. But then after all the research, I was like, I've got to read this book, and so do you guys. So thank you so much for your time. We are going to be right back after this with Fast Facts. I feel like I learned so much from Tony, but here are my top 7 keys to success from my interview with him. Number 1, realize your purpose. He said that the reason why you want a certain outcome is actually much more powerful than that outcome, and that successful people are driven by a deep sense of purpose that gets them hungry in the first place and keeps them hungry. So find your purpose. Number 2, know your numbers. He says that the main reason entrepreneurs and small business owners fail in the first few years is because they don't know how to read their numbers. He talks about it like being a pilot on autopilot, and everything's fine, you can coast for a while, but as soon as you're in a storm, if you don't know how to read the instruments, you're going to die. So really figure out how to read your financials. Number 3, recognize your patterns. He says that the #1 drug in America is actually an addiction to our problems. And if you're a small business owner or entrepreneur, you probably have a lot of patterns or bad habits that are holding you back. One of those patterns may be to start something new as soon as you hit a rough patch, instead of sticking with your current business idea. And he says that every single business has treasure in it. It's your job to find it. But he also said if you don't have passion for what you're doing, it's probably not going to work. So again, go back and figure out your purpose and remember why you started your business in the first place. Number 4, risk failing. I thought his story with the woman with the snake phobia was amazing, because he could have coached her one-on-one, and instead he did it in front of a crowd of people. I mean, it was do or die at that moment. And I think that's what we don't realize, is how risky really successful people are. He put himself on the line, which he still continues to do over and over and over again. He said he puts himself in a position where he is forced to go forward and there's nowhere else to go. Number 5, renew your mind. Obviously, he values reading. He read 100 books a day for the first few years that he was out on his own. But he did say that reading is not enough. And a lot of us in today's culture read information, but we're not applying it. So make sure that you apply what you're learning and try to read at least 30 minutes a day. He also talked about some strategies to making sure that you're not just living from to-do list to to-do list, which will wear you out, and that you can also renew your mind on a physiological level by doing incantations and engaging your body and rewiring that myelin in your brain, which I think is super fascinating. And he has written and spoken more on that topic. You should go check it out if you're interested in that. Number 6, recharge your body. Now, obviously not all of us are going to do a hot, cold plunge in the morning. And maybe we don't need to, because we may not be facing the kind of inflammation that he's facing. But every single successful person that I sit down with takes their health seriously, because they need the energy and the focus that comes from being physically fit in order to achieve at that level. And if you and I want to achieve at that kind of level, then we have to take our health seriously as well. Which is why now I have a trainer and I watch my diet much more than I did when I started this whole talk show, because every single person brought it up. Now, Tony says to get your blood pumping for at least 10 minutes a day, because there's such a mind-body connection. Remember, he says fear is physical and so is courage. So don't underestimate the power of getting your blood flowing every single day. And number 7, refresh your spirit. I love how he talked about you can't be grateful and angry at the same time. You can't be grateful and fearful at the same time. So a daily gratitude practice is another thing that keeps coming up in my interviews with successful people. He also talks about giving back. You know, he took care of a group of nuns in California that were going to be evicted, and he keeps $100 bills on him so he can give if the mood strikes him. He prays in the morning that he'll be ready to give, he'll be prepared to give, that he'll be a blessing to people. So there's so much that goes into it. So many people want to know the secret to his stamina, the longevity of his career, that he can still do these multi-day live events up on stage. The reason he says he can keep going is because to give back like that, to give and give his talents and services, that energizes him. Another way that Tony continues to give back is that he's offering his current best-selling book for free. If you go to his website, you just pay shipping and handling. So we don't have an official giveaway this month. I encourage you to check it out. Again, that's for free at his website. You just pay shipping and handling. Now, let's get back to Tony Robbins for some fast facts. We are back. We're going to do fast facts, which is just answer as quick as you can. These are just random fun things. Are you ready? Born ready, right? Okay, what is the wallpaper on your cell phone?
It's a picture of my wife.
What is the last thing you Googled?
Oh my gosh. The last thing I Googled, last night I was looking up some information about fiduciaries. That was the last thing I looked at.
Scrabble or charades?
Neither. Pictionary.
Really? Most recent book you've read?
I just read the top one. I've reread a book I read a long time ago, which I loved again, and it's the top 100. It's the 100 most influential people in history. It's fascinating.
Do you read fiction ever? Do you have a favorite fiction book?
I did when I was a kid. To be honest, I don't read fiction. I go to movies instead. When I'm reading, I'm usually reading something that's informative or educational.
Chocolate or vanilla?
Gosh. I usually combine those two, actually.
All right, that's fair. I'll accept that answer. One word you're guilty of saying too often?
Oh my God, probably the F word when I'm pissed.
Who's the last person that called or texted you?
My wife.
Last vacation you took?
Fiji.
Hobby, if you have one, or do you have a hobby?
I love to snowboard, and I love to scuba dive. So many different things. Love to play golf.
Coffee or tea?
I'm not a coffee guy, and I'm not a tea guy. I drink water, boring as that is, primarily. But I can drink tea, it's just not something I reach for.
Favorite snack?
Favorite snack?
Let me guess. Raw almonds.
No, well, I do eat almonds, but I wouldn't say it's my favorite. I got some cool protein bars that are pretty delicious, even though they're good for you.
If Tony Robbins were to just get nuts and like have a total cheat day, what would that
I
look
can tell you
like?
that easily. There's a place in Palm Beach where my home is that's got this hot fudge sundae that is to die for.
Okay,
It's
so
called
he
Palm
is
Beach
human.
Grill. Go to the Palm Beach Grill. You'll have the best hot fudge sundae of your life.
Wine or beer?
I don't drink
Neither,
alcohol.
right?
Yeah.
Okay. Pancakes or waffles?
Well, my wife and a member of our family make this. We have this bread that has no carbs in it, and they actually make what's it called? Toast. What do you call it? When they put they put stuff on. What's it called?
Other than toast?
No,
French
it's
toast?
French toast. Thank you. No,
Yeah.
French toast.
Do you have a guilty pleasure TV show? I'm guessing no.
No, I'm watching Billions these days because I
Oh,
coach
yeah.
the young woman there. Not in the sex scenes, obviously, but how she works for the billionaire clients.
Favorite cereal?
Nope.
Favorite music right now?
Oh my gosh, I love so many other kinds of music. I mean, I love Rihanna, I love rap, I love, I love pop music. Rihanna's one of my favorites, though, I'd say.
Really? Did not expect that. Biggest pet peeve of yours?
People that are mean to other individuals, I won't tolerate.
What would your wife say is her biggest pet peeve that you do?
That I don't sleep.
And what were you doing right before this interview?
An interview.
And what are you going to do right after this
An
interview?
interview. I'm going to Bloomberg right now.
Awesome. Thank you so much for
Thank you for
squeezing
your
us
time.
in. This
I
was
really enjoyed
great.
it.
I am Kelsey Humphreys here with Tony Robbins, and this has been The Pursuit.